Gaywyck by Vincent Verga. Publisher Allison Books, Los Angeles, New York. Narrator Eric Aust. Chapter 14. I was petrified last night. I expected to be violently blown away. My secret friend fanned herself in the overheated room while freezing rain pummeled the windows. Her old-fashioned white organdy gown covered my lap and most of the chase. Aren't you used to storms by now? Oh, these are things one never accepts. The boys were born during a storm, you know? Mary Rose tried to drown herself, they tell me. Foolish woman. Bravado. Cormac saved her. Denver's adores Cormac. Everything begins there. You think so? Oh, absolutely. Nanny Wells said just the other day that if you look into anything, you will see Denver's. She's right. This morning I saw him in my A-cup. I nodded. A key turned. A lock clicked. I rose, kissed her extended hand, and moved quickly into the open closet, tugging on a certain coat hook. I released the spring and quietly passed to the other side. Methodically, I locked the passageway. Since the arrival of Jonesy, I was apprehensive of carelessness. My nightmares had ceased, and I was alert to possibilities. Once, standing in the art room, I heard Jonesy struggling with his piano lesson next door. He had begun soon after arriving, and as the lessons were scheduled for just before tea, keys became a permanent fixture at the mid-afternoon table, accompanying his always ravenous pupil from keyboard to sideboard in the small dining room. The boy played clumsily and learned slowly, which was not surprising. We were amazed to find he could retain anything from lesson to lesson. Totally illiterate. He was no use to me in the libraries, and none as a companion for more than the shortest periods. He was incapable of uttering a kind word about anyone or anything. Denver's considered it his Christian duty to teach him to read, and Key seemed activated and challenged by the presence of La Enfant Sauvage. I left him to them. Wasps attract wasps, Brian commented. Go visit your friends in the laundry room window. You won't find any butterflies in their midst except laid on as a main course. One afternoon I found our guest in my rooms. When I returned from my music lesson to dress for luncheon, instinctively I glanced at my journal on the desk. I felt a spasm of anxiety before remembering the grinning fool's handicap and Denver's recent quip concerning his mental constipation. What are you doing here, Jonesy? I come to walk you to lunch. That's kind of you. I thought you'd like it, he leered. I wanted to clout him, and then I imagined how disappointed Danough would be, and contented myself with a heavy frown before going into my room to dress. The coiffure drawers were open. Jonesy, were you podging around in here? No! What the fuck would I do that for? He learned early that a well-placed obscenity could distract from the issue at hand, but I'd learned quickly how transparent most of his attempts at manipulation were. I didn't even pause to reprimand him. Next time you're snooping, close the doors and windows afterward. And there was a pause. I waited for a hotly phrased denial. I'll remember that one, thanks. I'm sure you will. A little more time with us, and you may become domesticated. I had not been surprised to find him sprawled on my sofa. He had a knack for being just outside when a door opened suddenly, and next to a room occupied by adults engaged in private conversation, he dawdled at table after meals and was always the first seated, lest any chat be missed. He lurked around corners and at bins and stairwells. He also disappeared for hours, regardless of the weather, and I dared not speculate on his wanderings, because as I now understood, I was afraid to know. Something told me he was eager for trouble. Something also told me he would find it. Leaving the art room after the visit to my secret friend, I avoided passing the music room. By taking the small stairs at the end of the hall, I hurried along the second-floor corridor, pausing before approaching the main staircase to listen for footsteps or conversation. The piano above had quieted. I did not wish to collide with Keyes and Jonesy. Descending, there was silence. I hastened to my rooms to prepare for tea. A dramatic change had come over Keyes since the advent of Seth Jones, and I pondered its manifestations. As I sat watching the aged music master, that evening at dinner, Beethoven was laid to rest soon after his second pupil began lessons, and almost instantaneously the teacher transformed himself into a fop, a dandy, an overdressed, overscented, overmannered, arch, coy, silly, giggling spectacle, replete with lace handkerchief and overzealous applications of the curling iron and the rouge pot. The ultimate folly, however, was a pair of white linen gloves which he wore during dinner. Appearing at each meal, he achieved by degrees the extraordinary disguise he wore in toto at dinner. It was as if each morning he forgot where he deposited this mannerism or that curl, rediscovering them during the course of the day under his sofa or that sheet of music. He maintained an appropriately animated conversational style, but he frequently raised his fluttering eyes on the grinning Jones whelp. I thought of Larry and wanted to share the observations with Denvers, but he too had changed, albeit more gradually and more subtly. For several days he absented himself from the evening meal, then began dressing in elegantly tailored clothing I had never seen before. "We must all join the game, Robbie." "He won't look quite so absurd if we all up the ante. Meanwhile, is there ever any fool like an antique one?" I could not decide which evenings were worse, when Jones sat grinning dumbly, vacantly, eating in silence, causing Keyes to chatter incessantly and Denvers to counter-chatter, or when Jones himself nattered throughout the meal, spewing food in every direction, all the while demanding and receiving our undivided attention. I would stare at him, appalled and slightly frightened by the power he had over the other two men. "I met a sweet little lass today. Have any of you lads got your peg up her? I told her it was a slammer of this house, and I was starting to envy my goddamn brother riding back and forth on that fucking choo-choo. She ran away, and that dumb fat-ass cook—" "Mr. O'Shea," Denver's corrected. "Yeah, O'Shea. He chased me out of the kitchen with a fork." He would ramble on in his ugly, raspy voice, pausing to snort and guffaw at his own feeble jokes, usually joined at those moments by Denvers and Keyes, now become Tweedledum and Tweedledee. Occasionally, I would interrupt him and try to divert the conversation to more fertile ground, and I would boldly charge him to belt up. But since neither of the other two seemed to object to his blather, I eventually surrendered and stopped listening. Every now and then I studied him to fathom his appeal, but I could never see beyond the squat troll, more men than boy, and his vulgar whining sound and dirty, crenellated fingernails. A creature of malicious cunning. I was not alone in my dislike of Seth Jones. Brian refused to acknowledge his presence, and if ever the interloper entered a room where Cale was, the cat, ears pressed back against his head, would dash out. Unseen from the orangery, I once watched while the boy tried to feed the cat some tidbit. With narrow eyes, Cale remained rigid in a crouched position until the irritated Jones tossed the offering and stomped away. For several weeks, I observed a concentrated effort on the boy's part to woo Cale. All to no avail. Working in the library, I watched Puss awaken from a deep sleep and hiss with claws extended when Jones approached. "Leave Cale alone. You're wasting your time." "Mind your own business. I never waste my time." "Cale is my business. Leave him alone." When I next discussed Jones with Denvers, I came away from the interview puzzled by his ambivalence. He professed boredom with the runt, yet spoke of him with great admiration, close to old-fashioned zest. "He is a despicable, callous little monster, society's Frankenstein thing. But perfection is not of this world." According to Brian, only Denvers and Keyes accepted the boy. The staff despised him. Mr. O'Shea sent his niece home, until the time when that rascal is gone, and Ambrose refused to serve him. A nauseating slob. But Denvers turned livid. "A guest of Mr. Gaylord's," etc. And the old man acquiesced, hurt and angered by the charges of elitism and negligence. Danough Gaylord wrote to say how pleased he was that everything was working out so well. And Denvers had written detailing the boy's progress. While the tutor read our employer's reply around tea, I silenced my discontent, aware more than ever, as I was intended, that I, too, was a guest at Gaywyck. Wherever I happened to be, Cale was nearby. I called us the fugitives. As long as I could arrange my day without interference, I made no more complaints. Then the order of life began to change. Jones slept late in the mornings. Breakfast was shifted to 9:30. Jones no longer found Denver's study comfortable for lessons. They commandeered the downstairs library, causing me to alter my morning routine. And then the question of tea arose. 4 o'clock was too late for the growing boy. It was shifted to 3:30. I was distressed until I discovered my secret friend would also be affected. But by then, my complaints had angered Denvers, who imperiously accepted my apologies as though betrayed. I was furious with myself for fearing his anger. The entire Mad Tea Party, as Brian and I dubbed the mess, was a true domestic crisis, and removed me even further from Denver's affection. Then came the matter of food. Jones loathed chicken, accepted it only southern fried. Jones despised stews. Jones abominated veal. Macaroni made him puke. Fish gave him gas. Sauces brought him out in hives. Only white bread was actual. Vegetables, all vegetables, were glop. Salads were for rabbits and sissies. I only half heard his complaints until I began missing the foods he railed against, while growing overly familiar with the ones he praised. "This is the 3rd time this week we've had roast beef," I muttered to Ambrose, who held the platter for me. "I love roast beef," Jones retorted. "So do I, but enough is enough. I ain't all the shit you like, Robbie boy." Keith giggled. Denvers sat silent. Ambrose banged the service dish down on the sideboard and fled the room. I reached down to pet Cale, then realized it was Jones's white napkin that Ambrose had accidentally tracked to my side while handling the beef platter. I rankled. Cale was no longer allowed in the dining room. Jones had complained. White hairs were everywhere. The cat hadn't fussed over the discussion. Even under my chair, he wasn't safe from pieces of creamed glop or low-flying chicken bones. "Denvers," I chose words carefully, "why can't we eat as we always ate? Letting Jones take only what he wants, while we eat what we want. We must endeavor to make everyone happy, and a growing boy needs a balanced diet." His frown warned me I was nearing perdition. I nodded, waiting for the approved mashed potatoes. Ambrose appeared with a great crystal bowl of broccoli hollandaise, caught his eye as he placed it before Jones. There was mischief there, and I glanced away. "Ambrose!" snapped Denvers. "I ordered the vegetables served ungarnished, with sauces separate." "Since Mr. Jones don't eat broccoli, I thought it would make no matter with broccoli, since Mr. Jones says broccoli looks like trees, and people don't eat trees." "Did you say that, Jonesy? Aren't you a clever deer?" Denvers ignored Keyes' chirping. "Koala bears eat trees," I thought. Jones looked like a koala bear. "Ambrose!" he commanded again. "Remove that broccoli and bring it to us with the sauce in a gravy bowl." Ambrose stood unflinchingly obviously enraged and eager for the confrontation. "Did you hear what I said, Ambrose? I ain't washing no cooked veg for nobody." Denvers slowly pushed his chair away from the table. Keys stopped chirping. I felt ill. The pale line between master and servant was now frighteningly clear. Denvers rose. The door to the kitchen opened. Brian entered carrying 2 crockery bowls. One held broccoli, and the other sauce. He thumped them on the table, and with an extended gesture, whisked the offending course back into the kitchen. Denver said. Ambrose repeated in a dull, flat voice. "I ain't washing no cooked veg for nobody." He left us sitting in silence. Jones was the first to speak. "I hate trees, with or without white slush." Denvers glared at him across the table. "Shut up, Jonesy," he said impatiently. "No one cares about your preferences." "I wouldn't bet a penny on that one." Denvers and Keys laughed. I reached for the broccoli, smothering it with sauce. I finished my meal without looking up from my plate. That night, when I was comfortably in bed with Cale settled on the pillow over my head, Jones paid me a visit. He wore only a robe with no covering on his feet. "What do you want?" I asked without moving, forcing him to curl on the bottom of the bed. I noticed his legs were hairy, his toenails blackened with grime. Cale stopped purring. "I thought I'd make sure you were all tucked up." "Nice of you. Good night. Those 2 nearly had a set to at the table tonight. I was scared for a minute there." "You were scared? You caused it." "I know," he laughed. "You and me are the only sane blokes in this house. We should be friends. If you knew what was good for you, you'd jump at the chance. Say, I'm cold out here. Let me under the covers." "If you're cold, go to bed." "Your own bed." "I can't. Not just yet, anyways." "Why not?" "I got my reasons. If we were friends, I could tell you things which would make you pretty blonde hair stand on end." "My pretty blonde hair is happy right where it is. Go to bed, Jonesy." He slid off the bottom of my bed and ambled to the top, placing his hand on my head. Cale hissed. "You ain't called me Jonesy in a long time. Let me under the covers, Robbie boy. I'm freezing my butt off out here." I hadn't called him Jonesy in a long time because those other 2 had converted it into a term of endearment. "Go to your own bed, Jones." He removed his hand and stretched. "Good night, Jones." "You're making a big mistake. You'll be sorry." "Are you threatening me?" "I don't need to threaten nobody. I'm too smart for that." Mucky shit. "I'll tell you one thing, though. When I get what I want from this place, you'll be the first to know." "Good. Write me a letter, if you've learned to hold a pen by then." Smiling, he put his fingers to his forehead in the gesture of Danough Gaylord's salute. "I won't have to write no letter. I'll just leave you my journals. It's funny the way everybody in this cockeyed house writes everything down in books. It's enough to make a body want to learn reading." I sat up in bed. Cale grunted. "Good night, Robbie boy. Pleasant dreams." He taunted, repeating the salute and leaving me alone. I leaped out of the bed, felt the chill immediately, and bounded back. There was no point in my going after him. I was angry at myself for believing his claim of illiteracy than I was at him for snooping in my journal. He's a sneaky, lying mongrel, I thought. I was right. He's vermin, and I'll never trust him again for an instant. Seth Jones telling me he could read was a serious tactical error. I had no idea what war he was waging, but he had made a blunder. I knew it. He knew it. The next morning after breakfast, he sought me out in the upstairs library. "Robbie boy, I'm sorry for what I said last night." "I'm not." We looked into each other's faces. He smiled, revealing those crooked, rotting teeth of his, somewhat improved since his sojourns with us and his introduction to a toothbrush. I did not smile. I tried to appear stern rather than angry. I just want my share, he said softly. You got the big fish. Can I have the small fry? For the first time in my dealings with him, I was speechless. I could not believe I had heard him correctly. He went down to his sham reading lesson with Denver's. I walked to the window and stood waiting, the gray waves fanning the shore. After a good 10 minutes of brooding, I forced myself to resume my work. The next morning, I found a black orchid in my water jug. Sometime during the night, a visitor had stolen into my room. I assumed it a peace offering and said nothing. I awoke to flowers regularly in the coming months. Once, after a snowstorm, I opened my drapes and discovered footprints on the portico outside my window, with an orchid resting on the banister where I was certain to see it. Another day, the shape of a drift where an orchid was planted clearly demonstrated a person had stood for a considerable time peering through the drapes, watching me sleep. It was a game I found charming. I should have recognized it was not in the style of Seth Jones. Again, I did not remember my Greek. Gay Mysteries audiobooks. I think it is easy to hate a label, but a face humanizes the word. So this effort is twofold. To offer comfort to those like myself that your world didn't end because you don't fit into the view of acceptable society on both sides. And in hopes of helping those with family that are LGBTQ, that it doesn't mean we are aliens from the child they once knew. Reassure them so they can maybe be supportive at the same time, being true to their values.